There is a quiet strength in the way Japan trains its people to endure, to persist, to rise every single day with an unwavering sense of duty. It is not loud, it is not glamorous, and it is certainly not built overnight. Yet this method, this centuries-old philosophy, has shaped some of the most resilient minds in the modern world. The fascinating thing is that it doesn't begin with heroic intensity or fiery motivation. It begins with something small, almost invisible, the kind of action that feels too simple to matter, too tiny to ever change a life, until it does. And once it takes root, it transforms ordinary people into something extraordinary, disciplined, calm, unbreakable. If you walk this path of discipline and self-mastery too, subscribe. People chase motivation. They wait for inspiration. They wait for clarity, for the right moment, for the surge of energy that will finally push them into action. But the Japanese approach is different. It doesn't rely on inspiration. It doesn't trust motivation. It knows both are fragile, fleeting, inconsistent. Instead, it builds discipline like a craftsman sharpening a blade, slowly, deliberately, with patience so steady it almost looks like stillness. This system is built on two ancient pillars, Shitsuke, the art of everyday discipline through structure, order, and environment, and Gaman, the warrior's endurance, the ability to keep going even when every muscle aches and every doubt rises. Alone, each concept is powerful. Together, they create a mind that does not shatter under pressure. They create a soul that stays steady even when life becomes unbearable. But there is a price for this transformation. You must begin so small that your ego will laugh at you, so small that people around you will think you're wasting your time, and you must be willing to continue even when discomfort claws at your ribs, even when your mind begs you to stop. Because Shitsuke teaches the structure, Gaman teaches the endurance, but it is you who must walk through the fire. The story you're about to hear begins far from temples or bamboo forests. It begins in a cramped apartment in the outskirts of Chicago, inside a room cluttered with laundry, old takeout boxes, and the stale smell of a life put on hold. A man named Daniel sat cross-legged on the floor, holding a folded letter in his hands, his third resignation in 18 months. 32 years old, intelligent, creative, full of potential, yet unable to maintain a commitment longer than a few weeks. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't stupid, he simply couldn't endure the long, slow grind that success demands. Daniel had tried everything. New jobs, new routines, new workout plans. He started them with fire, with enthusiasm, with the boastful certainty of a man who had finally turned his life around. And every time, without fail, he'd collapse within days. A skipped day became a skipped week. A missed task became a silent surrender. He was trapped in a loop. Begin again, burn out, give up. Begin again, burn out, give up, over and over, until the pattern itself became a prison. His relationships crumbled for the same reason. His ex-partner had once told him, "You don't stay with anything long enough for it to grow." And she was right. Whether it was a commitment, a dream, a conversation, or even a promise, he cracked under discomfort. Pain, boredom, or uncertainty always made him flee. On that particular night, sitting alone under the dim light of a cheap floor lamp, Daniel finally confronted the truth he had avoided his entire life. The problem wasn't the jobs, the routines, the goals, or the plans. The problem was him. His inability to sustain effort long enough for anything meaningful to bloom. His bank account had less than $500. His rent was due in 6 days. His resume was a battlefield of abandoned attempts. Something had to change, but this time, not in the explosive, motivational way he always tried. He needed a different path, a quieter path, a structured path. So he spent the entire night searching not for how to get motivated, but for something deeper, how disciplined people think. He didn't want inspiration, he wanted structure, he wanted consistency, he wanted a mind that didn't fold every time life pushed back. That's when he stumbled across an article about Japanese manufacturing, specifically about the fives method, the system that keeps factories efficient, clean, and consistent for decades. But what caught his attention wasn't the first 4 pillars. It was the last one, Shitsuke. Sustained discipline through simple, repeatable routines. Workers weren't superhuman. They weren't forcing themselves to be disciplined. Their environment made discipline natural. They didn't rely on willpower, they relied on design. As he read deeper, Daniel realized something painful. He woke up every day fighting a mental war before he even left his bed. Should I get up now or just rest a few more minutes? Should I go to work or quit? Should I cook or order food again? Should I try today or try tomorrow? Every decision drained him before the day even began. His environment was designed for failure. His mind was exhausted from constant negotiation. No wonder he lost. But the article didn't stop there. It mentioned another powerful concept woven into Japanese upbringing, gaman, the ability to withstand discomfort with calm perseverance. In Japan, children are taught that feelings, especially uncomfortable ones, are not commands. Cold is not an emergency. Fatigue is not a stop sign. Fear is not a reason to retreat. Pain does not mean failure. They learn that endurance is a noble trait, a quiet strength. Daniel realized that he had spent decades treating every uncomfortable feeling as a full stop. Feeling tired meant quitting for the day. Feeling embarrassed meant abandoning the project. Feeling overwhelmed meant disappearing entirely. He lived at the mercy of his emotions. That night, something inside him shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was a quiet acceptance, the kind a person reaches only after they've broken enough times. He decided to rebuild himself using Shitsuke Gaman, brick by brick. He always dreamed of becoming a freelance designer, not because he wanted fame or riches, but because he wanted freedom. Too many bosses, too many rules, too many systems he couldn't fit into. But every time he imagined starting a business, his mind created a monstrous picture. Branding, websites, big clients, taxes, a business plan that looked like a novel. The vision was so large that he froze before taking the first step. But now he understood what he had never understood before. Great beginnings are not built in greatness, they are built in smallness, tiny actions repeated without interruption. So Daniel decided to start small, so small it felt ridiculous. He created one simple goal: send 3 outreach messages a day, not 30, not 10, just 3. He placed his laptop on the kitchen table the night before. He left it open to his contact list. His phone stayed in another room. His coffee mug waited beside the keyboard. No decisions, no friction, no options. Just sit down, type 3 messages, and click send. The next morning, he woke up, shuffled to the table, sat down, and sent the messages. It took less than 15 minutes. When he finished, he didn't feel proud. He didn't feel transformed. But he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: follow through. The next day, the resistance began. His mind whispered, yesterday was good enough. 3 messages won't change anything. Rest today, try tomorrow. For the first time, Daniel answered that voice with Gaman. He didn't negotiate, he didn't argue, he didn't explain. He simply sat down, opened the laptop, and sent the 3 messages. Not because he felt like it, but because discomfort was no longer the enemy. On the 3rd day, the resistance returned. On the 4th day, on the 6th. But he kept going. And then, on the 7th day, something remarkable happened. His hands moved before his doubts. His body acted before his excuses. The routine had begun to settle inside him. 1 week, 21 messages, 0 replies. And yet, something was changing. Not around him, but within him. On the 15th day came the first reply. A polite, not at this moment. On the 19th day came another. Also negative. On the 22nd day, he almost quit. But on day 27, a small local business wrote back. They needed help with a simple design for their online store. The pay was modest, almost insignificant, but the victory was enormous. It wasn't about the money, it was about proof that consistency compounds. And that is where Daniel's transformation truly began. The path of discipline rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with thunder, excitement, or a sudden burst of motivation. It begins quietly, almost invisibly, in moments so small that most people walk right past them without ever realizing their power. Imagine the apprentice in the temple once more. Before dawn, when the world is still covered in a thin layer of silence, he steps into the courtyard with nothing but a broom in his hands. There is no applause, no audience, no dramatic music. Only the cold stones beneath his feet and the faint rustle of the wind moving between the wooden beams of the temple. For weeks, months, maybe years, this simple task feels meaningless to him. He wonders why he was brought here if all he would do is sweep leaves off stone. He watches other apprentices meditate, train, practice forms, learn techniques, and he feels behind, insignificant, almost invisible. But the master never changes his task. Sweep, he says, and so the apprentice sweeps. He begins to notice that the mind resists more than the body. The broom is light, the courtyard small, yet his thoughts drift everywhere, to memories, fantasies, worries, frustrations. Every push of the broom becomes a battle against impatience. What he does not realize is that this is precisely the point. Discipline is not built in comfortable moments, it is built in the quiet friction between what you want to do and what you choose to do. At first, the apprentice does the work with irritation, then with resignation, then eventually with acceptance, and finally, with presence. One morning, just before sunrise, something shifts. He notices the way the bristles move across the ground, the rhythm, the calm. His hands no longer resist. His breathing aligns with the motion. For the first time, he is not thinking about finishing. He is simply here. This tiny shift, almost unnoticeable, is the beginning of real discipline. People today look for dramatic transformations. They chase big goals, intense routines, massive resolutions. They want life to change overnight. But the ancient Japanese understood a deeper truth. Big changes are born from small repetitions. A drop of water means nothing by itself, but a drop repeated patiently can carve stone. The apprentice continues his task day after day, and slowly, without realizing it, he begins to change. His thoughts become less chaotic, his focus sharpens, the noise inside him starts to fade. He begins to see the world around him not as a distraction but as a teacher. Repetition does something powerful. It clears away the dust covering your true nature. And just as the courtyard becomes clean, so does the mind. Most people never stay long enough with one action to experience this. They quit too early, shift paths too fast, abandon the process the moment boredom arrives. They believe boredom means nothing is happening. But in Japanese discipline, boredom is the gateway. It is the test. It is the fire you must walk through before your mind becomes still. The apprentice's quiet transformation mirrors the truth of every human life. You are shaped by what you repeat. If you repeat distraction, your mind becomes scattered. If you repeat excuses, your mind becomes weak. If you repeat discipline, even in its smallest form, your mind becomes unbreakable. And then comes the moment that changes everything. After years of sweeping, one morning the master approaches him. The apprentice expects criticism, or perhaps a new task. Instead, the master simply observes him for a long time, saying nothing. Finally, the master nods and says, "You are ready." The apprentice is confused. Ready for what? He has done nothing extraordinary. He has not fought, not mastered weapons, not achieved anything impressive. The master smiles gently. You have learned the first lesson. You can stay with one action without abandoning it. Now you may learn the next. And in that moment, the apprentice understands the truth. The task was never about sweeping. It was about strengthening the muscle of attention, about learning to remain steady when the mind wants to wander, about building the ability to endure repetition without losing presence. The broom was not a tool for cleaning the courtyard. It was a tool for cleaning the mind. This is the part most people never see. They think discipline requires grand gestures or perfect conditions. But discipline is grown in the smallest actions, the ones you repeat even when no one sees them, even when they feel boring, even when you feel no progress. You build discipline when you choose effort over ease. You build identity when you choose consistency over mood. You build strength when you return to your task, even without motivation. The apprentice's growth is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not impressive on the surface. But inside, he has become someone new. Someone who no longer runs from difficulty. Someone who no longer seeks excitement. Someone who can stay with one thing until it becomes a part of him. This is what modern life has lost. People chase pleasure but avoid patience. They pursue progress but avoid repetition. They want mastery without monotony. Yet the ancient path is clear. If you want to change your life, you must first learn to master the small, boring, quiet actions, because these are the ones that shape your mind. The apprentice eventually realizes he isn't just sweeping a courtyard, he is sweeping the obstacles inside himself: impatience, distraction, restlessness, doubt. With every stroke of the broom, he becomes more aligned, more focused, more present. And in that presence, the warrior inside him begins to awaken. Because discipline is not about control, it is about clarity. The clarity that comes from doing one thing fully, even if it is small. The change happens slowly, then suddenly, one day, without noticing how it happened, you become someone different, someone calmer, someone stronger, someone capable of staying on the path long after everyone else gives up. This is how a human being becomes powerful, quietly, steadily, patiently. And now, this path is open for you. Every transformation has a moment where everything becomes clear, not in a dramatic flash of lightning, not in a heroic moment, but in a quiet understanding deep inside the chest. A realization that the life you want is not far away, not impossible, not unreachable. It is simply on the other side of consistency. And the Japanese masters understood this better than anyone. They believed that a person's true power is not measured by their talent, their intelligence, or their strength, but by their ability to remain loyal to one simple action for long enough to let that action change who they are. Because discipline is not something you force, it is something you grow. Imagine the apprentice once more, now older, now more aware. He begins to see that the sweeping, the cleaning, the repetitive tasks were never meant to break him. They were meant to remove the layers of chaos that prevented him from seeing his real nature. Every stroke of the broom was sweeping the courtyard, yes, but it was also sweeping his mind. He starts to notice patterns he never saw before. He can stay focused for longer periods. He reacts slower to distractions. His thoughts no longer control him, he controls them. Something inside him has settled, and something stronger has awakened. This is the part of the journey most people miss. The awakening doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like breathing. It feels natural, effortless, almost obvious. Because once discipline becomes who you are, it becomes strange to imagine living without it. The apprentice begins to take on new tasks, more complex, more demanding. Yet he realizes they are never as difficult as they once would have been. Not because he has become stronger physically, but because his mind no longer fears difficulty. The hesitation that once held him back no longer has the same power. He has outgrown it. This is the quiet gift of consistency. You become someone who does not run from challenge. One evening, as the sun sinks below the mountains, painting the sky in soft orange, the apprentice sits alone outside his quarters. He watches the wind scatter fallen leaves across the courtyard he once swept. He smiles, because he knows now that the lessons were never in the tasks, but in the repetition of them. Discipline has become a rhythm inside him. He thinks back to his first days in the temple, how restless he was, how quickly he grew bored, how often he doubted himself, and he realizes something profound. A version of him that struggled was not weak, he was simply untrained. And that is when it becomes clear that most people quit, not because they are incapable, but because they never stay long enough for the process to change them. The next morning, before sunrise, the apprentice is seen standing in the same courtyard. He is no longer sweeping, he is simply breathing, allowing the cold morning air to fill him. There is nothing loud, nothing dramatic, yet he feels more powerful than ever before. Because he is no longer controlled by the world outside him, he has mastered the world inside him, and this is the transformation waiting for you. You have your own courtyard, your own broom, your own simple action that, repeated daily, will reshape your mind, sharpen your focus, and ignite the warrior inside you. But you must choose it. You must return to it. You must let it carve you into someone new. Discipline is not an explosion, it is erosion. The erosion of old habits, old excuses, old patterns. Bit by bit, day by day, until only the strongest parts of you remain. Most people wait for motivation, but motivation is a visitor. It comes and goes. What you need is identity, something that stays. Once you become someone who does the work stops feeling heavy. Once you become someone who keeps promises to yourself, discipline stops feeling like pressure. Once you become someone who lives with intention, distractions lose their power. The apprentice learned this slowly, gently, through 1,000 moments of showing up when he didn't feel like it. And you are capable of the same. You do not need perfection. You do not need intensity. You only need to begin, and to keep beginning, even when it feels small. There will be days you don't feel strong, days you don't feel motivated, days you doubt the process. But those are the exact days that shape you the most. Anyone can train when the sun is shining. Only the warrior trains when the sky is dark. And here is the truth that few people ever hear. Your mind is always listening to your actions. Every day, you are teaching it who you are. If you abandon your discipline, your mind learns to give up. If you return to your discipline, your mind learns resilience. If you stay with one action long enough, your mind learns mastery. Just like the apprentice, you are shaping a future version of yourself with every decision you make now. And one day, sooner than you think, you will wake up and realize that the struggle is gone, the resistance is gone, the doubt is gone. Not because life became easier, but because you became stronger. The warrior inside you is not sleeping. He is waiting, patiently, silently. For the moment you choose to rise, all it takes is one small action. Repeat it until it becomes a part of you. And once it becomes a part of you, you will never lose it again. This is how ordinary people become focused machines. This is how the undisciplined become unstoppable. This is how the lost become warriors, not through intensity, but through return, through presence, through small, unbroken steps. Your transformation begins the moment you decide to stay with one thing long enough to let it change you.